Okay, today we are going to cover multiplication of rational numbers. We're going to use a couple of problems from the book, Accentuate the Negative, to help us illustrate the multiplication of two rational numbers, either positive or negative. So the problem says, write and solve a number sentence for each situation. Use positive numbers for speeds running to the right and negative numbers for running speeds to the left. Use positive numbers for time in the future and negative numbers for time in the past. Each runner runs at a constant speed, so we don't have to worry about their speed changing. All right, so the first one says for 1A would be that Han passes the 0 point running at 5 meters per second to the right. Well, I know that earlier up here, according to the problem, that if they are moving to the right, that is a positive number, so that would be positive 5 meters per second. And then it asks, where will he be 6 seconds later? Well, we could either add this positive 5 per second 6 times, or we could simply multiply it by 6. Now, 6 seconds later implies that it's going to be happening in the future. So therefore, it's going to be a positive number. Well, this works just like positive multiplication that we learned a long time ago back in elementary school, where 5 times 6 equals 30. Okay, so that would be a positive 30 meters. Okay, because it asks how far or where will he be. So he would be 30 meters to the right. We'll go ahead and finish labeling our answer. Okay, very simple. All right, let's try another one. For 1B, it says Aurelia passes the 0 point running to the left at 6 meters per second. Well, up here it stated that if they were moving to the left, it would be a negative number. So we have negative 6 times, where will she be 8 seconds later? Again, the word later implies in the future, and therefore would be a positive 8. Okay, and so we are simply going to multiply these two numbers together just like we would normally. So 6 times 8 equals 48. Now here's where the sign comes in. If we have an odd number of negative signs, so in this case we only have one negative, our answer will be negative. Okay, so she would be negative 48 meters to the left. Now we're going to illustrate this a little bit different. If I have a negative number and I multiply that negative number, so I'll put it in parentheses, times a negative number, this would be a negative number times a negative number of times, and therefore if we added it or subtracted it or anything else, we would be looking at the differences between those numbers. So in this case, a negative times a negative is going to equal a positive, because we can't have a negative amount of a negative item. That's a double negative, and therefore it makes it a positive. All right, so let's illustrate another example. So if we had a negative number times a positive number, then our answer will be a negative number, because we have a negative amount of some positive things. We'll take this a step further and keep going with a positive times a negative. And again, we have a positive amount of some negative stuff, and therefore our answer will be a negative value. And then finally we have a positive times a positive, and that would equal a positive value. Okay, so in each one of these two situations, there is an odd number of negative signs in our problem, and therefore we get a negative answer. So if we had a negative times a negative times a negative, this would equal, well, these two would make it positive, and then throw in this one, Okay, so these two negatives would make a positive times this third negative, and so our answer would be negative. Again, illustrating the point that the odd number of negative signs would lead to a negative answer. Okay, so if we had a negative times a negative times a negative times a negative, or 4 negatives, these two would make a positive, these two would make a positive, and a positive times a positive would equal a positive number. All right, so here's what I want you to do before coming to class tomorrow. On page 56, I would like for you to finish A1C and A1D, which are very similar to these, thinking about positive numbers for the right, negative numbers to the left, positive numbers for times that are going to happen or that will happen, and negative numbers for times in the past, or where was he 6 seconds earlier, things like that. Go ahead and try this concept and see what you can come up with. See you in class.